So often people have been taught that kindness is the ultimate virtue. That to be a good person, you must never ruffle feathers, never challenge anyone, never stand firm. But that idea is not only misleading, it's dangerous. When kindness is defined as pleasing everyone, it quickly becomes something very different from true love. It becomes weakness disguised as virtue. It becomes a tool that others can exploit to keep you silent, to keep you compliant, and to keep you from standing on the truth. If you confuse being kind with being passive, you're not serving God's purpose, you're serving people's expectations. Think about it. If kindness always meant smiling, nodding, and agreeing, then even Jesus would fail by that standard. He wasn't always gentle in the way the world defines gentleness. He overturned tables in the temple when injustice and corruption were taking root. He spoke directly, even harshly, to religious leaders who were leading people astray. Was that unkind? No. That was love operating through truth. That was courage clothed in conviction. That was a higher form of kindness, one that didn't simply soothe people's feelings, but confronted the disease in their souls. When you give kindness indiscriminately, you actually rob it of its meaning. Because kindness without discernment is not kindness. It's flattery. It's cowardice masquerading as compassion. And sooner or later, people begin to see that your so-called kindness isn't really about them at all. It's about you wanting to be liked. That's not love. That's self-preservation. There's nothing godly about it. Real kindness requires strength because it involves saying no when necessary. It requires discernment because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is confront, not comfort. And it requires courage because truth is rarely applauded in a world that thrives on compromise. You cannot serve both truth and popularity at the same time. You cannot be a slave to God's calling and a slave to people's approval. You have to choose. So let's get it clear. Kindness does not mean weakness. Kindness does not mean enabling. Kindness means living in truth, with love as your motive and conviction as your guide. That's the kind of kindness that changes lives. Anything less is just politeness dressed up as virtue, and polite chains are still chains. Stop confusing kindness with people pleasing. One liberates, the other enslaves. Choose the one that sets you and those around you free. One of the greatest misunderstandings we face today is the belief that love means treating everyone the same. But if you look at the life of Jesus, you'll notice something striking. He never extended kindness in a one-size-fits-all manner. He was tender with the broken, patient with the searching, and merciful to the sinner who knew their need for grace. But he was also sharp with the arrogant, confrontational with the hypocrites, and unyielding with those who abused religion for personal gain. That's because true love isn't blind, it's discerning. It doesn't throw kindness around like loose change hoping to buy approval. It invests it carefully, guided by truth and purpose. Discernment is the ability to see beneath the surface, to recognize that not every smile hides goodwill and not every request deserves your yes. It's what keeps kindness from becoming weakness. Without it, your compassion can be hijacked by manipulation. People who have no interest in your well-being, no respect for your values, will gladly drain your kindness until you have nothing left. That's why the Bible doesn't just tell us to love. It tells us to guard our hearts, to test the spirits, to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Love without discernment is naive, and discernment without love is cold. But put them together, and you have strength that cannot be shaken. Think about the Pharisees. They were religious leaders, respected in their communities, but their hearts were hard, their motives corrupt. Jesus didn't waste soft words on them because flattery would have only deepened their deception. Instead, he confronted them. He exposed their hypocrisy for what it was. Was that cruel? No. That was love doing its hardest work, stripping away lies so that truth could stand in the open. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to indulge their delusion. So we have to stop treating kindness like a universal currency. It's not about making everyone feel comfortable. It's about bringing people closer to truth. If that truth comforts them, thank God. If it convicts them, also thank God. Because discernment knows that both comfort and conviction are acts of love when they serve God's greater purpose. Never forget this. Kindness without discernment leads people astray, but kindness with discernment leads people to freedom. Choose the kind that heals, not the kind that hides. When kindness is given without boundaries, it doesn't produce strength, it produces weakness. You've seen it before, the person who is always saying yes, always bending, always giving, but never standing. At first, it may look noble, even admirable, but over time you notice something. They're exhausted, they're resentful, and the very people they've been endlessly kind to have come to expect it, even demand it. That's not kindness anymore, that's captivity. When kindness is disconnected from wisdom, it stops being a gift and becomes a liability. God never called us to let others trample over us in the name of love. Boundaries are not unkind, they're necessary. A river without banks is just a flood spreading everywhere and destroying whatever lies in its path. But a river with boundaries channels its power, giving life and nourishment. Kindness works the same way. Without boundaries, it spreads thin, loses force, and can even end up causing harm. With boundaries, it becomes focused, intentional, and transformative. The danger of unguarded kindness is that it attracts those who thrive on taking advantage. They know you'll say yes. They know you'll sacrifice. They know you'll stretch yourself thin to avoid conflict, and slowly your kindness stops being an expression of strength and becomes a habit of survival. But here's the truth. If your kindness costs you your integrity, your peace, or your God-given purpose, it is no longer kindness, it's compromise. Jesus himself practiced boundaries. He fed the multitudes, but he didn't feed them every time they came back demanding bread. He healed countless people, but he didn't stay in one town just to satisfy everyone's needs. He withdrew to pray. He left crowds behind to continue his mission. Why? Because his kindness was never driven by demand, it was guided by purpose. He didn't let human pressure dictate divine calling. And that's the model for us. Kindness without boundaries is not Christ-like. It's unsustainable. The kind of kindness God calls us to is rooted in strength, guided by wisdom, and protected by limits. Without that, you will not have the capacity to love anyone well, because you'll be too busy being drained by everyone. So remember this. Boundaries don't make your kindness smaller, they make it stronger. Guard your kindness or it will be stolen. Direct your kindness or it will be wasted. The power of kindness lies not in giving it to everyone, but in giving it with purpose. There's a big difference between being nice and being truthful. Niceness is often about appearances. It's about smoothing things over, avoiding tension, and keeping everyone comfortable. But truth goes deeper. Truth isn't concerned with temporary comfort. It's concerned with lasting transformation. And here's the reality. Truth, when it's spoken, doesn't always feel nice. Sometimes it stings. Sometimes it unsettles. Sometimes it calls out what we'd rather keep hidden. But without truth, niceness becomes nothing more than empty words that leave people exactly where they are. We live in a culture that idolizes being nice. People are more worried about not offending than they are about not misleading. But what's the point of kindness if it leaves someone bound by the same chains? What good is it to pat someone on the back and smile while they're walking straight toward destruction? Niceness might win you applause in the moment, but truth spoken in love, has the power to set someone free. That's why scripture says the truth makes us free. Not politeness, not approval, not flattery. Freedom comes from truth, even when it cuts. Now, don't misunderstand me. Truth without love can be brutal. It can become a weapon that wounds instead of heals. But love without truth is just sentimentality. It feels good, but accomplishes nothing. Real love carries both. It speaks what needs to be spoken, but it does so with the heart of restoration. It may not always be received as kindness, but it is always meant for good. That's the difference between pleasing people and serving people. One keeps them comfortable, the other helps them grow. Look at Jesus again. He didn't hesitate to tell people hard truths. To the rich young ruler, he said, sell everything you have. To Peter, he said, get behind me, Satan. Those words weren't nice, but they were necessary. They pierced the illusion and exposed what was real. That's what truth does. It breaks down the facade so that healing can actually begin. So stop making niceness your highest aim. Niceness never saved anyone. Truth delivered with love is what changes lives. If your goal is just to be liked, you'll compromise truth every time. But if your goal is to set people free, you'll tell them what they need to hear, even when it's not what they want to hear. Niceness pleases crowds. Truth transforms souls. Choose transformation. One of the most dangerous traps people fall into is the trap of people pleasing. On the surface, it looks harmless. After all, what's wrong with wanting others to be happy? But the danger lies in the motivation. When your actions are driven by the need for approval, you stop living out of conviction and start living out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being liked. And the tragedy is that in trying to keep everyone else satisfied, you slowly lose yourself. You lose your authenticity, and even more critically, you lose your alignment with God's will. People-pleasing drains the soul because it forces you to live in constant performance mode. Every decision becomes about what will keep the peace, what will win applause, what will avoid criticism. And the more you give in to that cycle, the more you realize something. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough. People's expectations are endless, and their approval is fleeting. The very ones you bend over backwards to please today will be the ones criticizing you tomorrow. That's the futility of building your life on human approval. It has no foundation, no permanence, no loyalty. God did not design us to live under the tyranny of people's opinions. He designed us to live in freedom, guided by his truth. When you spend your life chasing after the applause of people, you inevitably compromise the applause of heaven. And the irony is, the more you try to please everyone, the less you truly please anyone. You dilute your voice, you blur your convictions, and you become a shadow of who God created you to be. Look again at Jesus. He never sought to please the crowds. He healed, he taught, he performed miracles. But when the truth offended them, he didn't water it down to keep them around. In fact, at times the crowd left him because the truth was too heavy. Yet he stayed faithful to his mission because his goal was never popularity. It was obedience. That's the example we're called to follow. So let's be clear. People-pleasing is not kindness, it's bondage. If you live for the approval of people, you will die by their rejection. But if you live for the approval of God, you will walk in freedom no one can take away. True kindness is never random. It is purposeful. It doesn't exist to make us feel good about ourselves or to create the appearance of being virtuous. It exists to align with God's greater plan, to reflect his character, and to help move others toward truth. That means kindness isn't always soft, it isn't always easy, and it certainly isn't always popular. Sometimes godly kindness comforts, but other times it confronts. Sometimes it soothes, and other times it challenges. Its goal isn't to keep people comfortable, it's to help them grow closer to the life God intends for them. When your kindness is grounded in God's purpose, it changes the way you give it. You stop handing it out indiscriminately, hoping people will like you, and you start offering it as a tool of transformation. You begin asking, will this act of kindness draw someone nearer to truth? Will it build them up in righteousness? Will it help them see God more clearly? If the answer is yes, then your kindness has meaning. If the answer is no, then it's nothing more than empty gestures that waste your energy and dilute your witness. We have to remember that kindness is not about avoiding conflict. In fact, Real kindness often produces conflict because light exposes darkness. Jesus embodied perfect love, and yet people hated him for it. They didn't crucify him because he was cruel. They crucified him because his truth-filled kindness revealed their corruption. That's the paradox of godly kindness. It will bless those who are humble enough to receive it, but it will provoke those who are determined to resist it. And that's why it takes courage. Anyone can be kind when it wins them approval, but it takes conviction to be kind in a way that confronts sin, challenges lies, and points to a higher standard. That's the kind of kindness God calls us to. Not the watered down version that keeps everyone comfortable, but the bold, purposeful version that partners with his will. So let me leave you with this. Don't waste your kindness on the pursuit of popularity. Direct it toward God's mission. Let your kindness be rooted in love, guided by truth, and anchored in purpose. Because when kindness is aligned with God's will, it doesn't just make people feel better, it makes them free.